disrupted.
America that I fought.
Weird thing to happen. Hello, one and all. Welcome to the so far. So there's a bit of a development going with the Lauren Chen Tenet Media Russian scandal. It really isn't much of a scandal. It's more just a comprehensive attack plan to further silence independent media, which is kind of the goal of our Canadian government. The C11, C18, C63, the censorship bills that are keep piling on. It is a plan of attack to defend their horrendous narrative, take narrative control, and to silence out competitors like independent YouTubers, podcasters, and so on and so forth. So, this alleged scandal that started on an allegation that Lauren Chen, who is a member of Tenet Media, who also hosts individuals like Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, Benny Johnson, and others, got a large sum donation by a supposed Russian oligarch. And they believe that because of this donation, it is peddling Russian disinformation into the West. However, that hasn't been shown up in the case. There hasn't been enough evidence to back these claims. It's just another conspiracy. I'm surprised Rachel Maddow hasn't chimed in constantly about this because, she's on the Russia boat constantly 24/7 peddling these conspiracies. So here's, for example, the National Post points out, says Canadian tied to alleged Russian propaganda scheme gives no comment to MP's questions. Chen says she wasn't willing to answer questions while possibly subject to a criminal investigation. And rightfully so, because these MPs that we know are in their own scandal of collusion when it comes to China and India, we know that there's a huge investigation on not only Trudeau's front, but also the Conservative Party and other members within Parliament itself that are tied to foreign affairs, that are tied to these foreign entities that are coercing the whims of Canadians. So, yeah, bringing in a YouTuber, bringing in someone that's trying to bring independent media by these ghouls that are already subjugated to their own conflicts of interest, they're going to turn the wheels against her constantly. And it's going to be unfair, it's going to be unjust, and that's exactly what they're doing here. So, for example, people like Viva Fry point out, and he's been covering a lot of this and great work that he's been doing, says Canada has fallen. There is no difference between the so-called Conservative Party and the tyrannical Liberal Party. Exactly. There are two wings of the same corrupt bird. Earlier this week, the purest form of modern-day McCarthyism you will ever see. Parliament is going after Lauren Chen, summoning her to testify on alleged Russian government allegedly using Tenet Media to spread Russian propaganda to undermine the West. Listen to the idiotic, tirades coming from the so-called conservative Raquel Dancho and liberal tyrant Jen O'Connell. Apparently, Raquel and the Conservative Party have forgotten about what a bunch of lying scoundrels the Liberals are. Or maybe the Conservative have been equally lying scoundrels the entire time. This is the absolute state of Canada, absolute madness. So, I would have to go on the ladder here and to say that I feel that, and this is where I bring attention to anyone that says, well, the best way to solve this problem is to vote Pierre Poilievre. Kick Trudeau out and get Pierre Poilievre in, and then everything's going to be fixed. That is not the case. That is not the case. Because they are equal sides of the same corrupt coin. And I feel that the reason conservatives are also trying to back this and try to discredit themselves of being free speech, saviors, even though they criticize the Liberal government for the heinous censorship that they're compiling, they're also guilty of creating this false dichotomy of censorship because they want to silence out independent media. They don't want to be criticized for the hasty. And considering the fact that Conservative Party is also under the same scrutiny of foreign interference, they're maybe trying to cover this up by peddling more towards individuals like Lauren Chen. And here's some of the testimony in this committee that they base this on national security, but really it has to do with the fact that Lauren Chen has a business in independent media. She got sponsorship by possibly a Russian oligarch. There's no evidence to back those claims. There's no financial statements to prove any of this conspiracy that the government of Canada is trying to ploy on her. And it just seems like an attack, further attack on independent media. So listen to this.
You can understand that the Public Safety and National Security Committee of Canada is incredibly concerned that if there is a Canadian citizen such as yourself receiving, well, according to the indictment, $10 million and falsely misleading commentators of your platform or where that money is coming from, and the purpose of that commentary is to propagate Russian government positions that deliberately undermine the West. Do you have any concerns of that, of the moral authority of that?
Do you have concerns of the moral authority by taking money from other countries and then propagating those policies among people that have nothing to do with it? I mean, that's a lot of big talk concerning the fact that you're getting money from Chinese influencers, you're getting money from Indian state oligarchs, and you're also getting continuous money from Israel and AIPAC. You're also getting money from Ukraine. You have infiltrators of the WEF in your cabinet positions, and yet you are putting that moralization and demonizing a YouTuber. You're demonizing a content creator because they somehow got $10 million from an alleged Russian businessman, and because of that, they're trying to say that that is connected right to Russian disinformation because they got money from a businessman overseas. But if you look at Tenet Media, if you look at the contributors of Tenet Media, they are independent broadcasters. They produce their own podcasts. They hire Americans. They talk about American politics. It's the same exact motion that they try to discriminate RT. They try to went after RT America, saying that's peddling Russian disinformation because it's Russian state media. Well, who's on that Russian state media? Larry King, Lee Camp, Jesse Ventura, William Shatner was on RT America before they shut it down. Ed Schultz, Rick Sanchez, individuals that were Americans producing content in America and covering American topics. But because they had to be broadcast on Russian state media because no other broadcaster was willing to open the doors for them and have this opportunity, they shut down that broadcaster. And it's funny how all the years, they have never had problems with RT America producing content. They never had a problem until a war broke out and they wanted to pick a side. They wanted to pick a side to engage in warfare, to engage in the proxy war, which we all know about. That is why they shut down RT America. That's why they care so much about Russian disinformation all of a sudden. Because once a war broke out and they had favorites, they want to protect that favoritism. They want to protect that narrative. They don't want people to be exposed with the truth and understanding of why this war is taking place.
For the reasons already given, I have no comment.
Mr. Chair, this is obviously quite frustrating. Ms. Chen has been called for this committee, and the allegations are incredibly serious that she took $10 million for her company from Russian agents, withheld the source of that funding to the commentators that she hired for Tenet Media with the purpose to proliferate Russian propaganda, which, as we know very well in this committee, Russia is an adversary to Canada looking to deliberately undermine this country, looking to see Canada weaken and fail.
So their only explanation, their only evidence to go after Lauren Chen is the fact that, well, we have understanding that somewhere down the line, you got money from Russia. Russia is an adversary of Canada, and they're definitely trying to undermine the West. No proof, no papers, no inquiries, none of that. It's all just hunches. It's a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy to try to demonize a Russian disinformationist. This is Canada, ladies and gentlemen. This is the backwards, upside down Parliament of Canada. And what a great time that they introduced this, as now we are completely silent. Now we have no further questioning on what was supposed to be the current investigation of Justin Trudeau's influence with China or their connection with India. Now we don't even talk about that because we're so focused on this. What great timing to now bring up Lauren Chen, because now that's put aside. All that's put aside. We don't even talk about governmental influence from foreign countries. But anyway.
And the idea that a fellow Canadian, Miss Chen, would take large amounts of money to undermine the Canadian interests, I take great personal and moral issue with that. Do you?
For the reasons already given, I have no comment.
Mr. Chair, I find it interesting. I didn't know who Ms. Chen was in advance of the U.S. indictment. Some of these kind of conspiracy theorist peddling accounts tend to be a dime a dozen. The real interesting factor, though, is who's paying for some of this disinformation. The witness has actually attacked trans kids, 2S LGBT community, women, men who stand up for women's equality. She suggested are on their periods and should eat a tub of ice cream. Doesn't seem to care about the ramifications of comments like this posted on the internet, attacking Ukrainians, Ukrainian sovereignty, and basically saying whatever she feels like without the consideration of implications to those people she attacks. I find it quite interesting that now, as she has an opportunity to defend some of these comments, perhaps it's the single lady's cat that's got her tongue, because she seems to be very opinionated when it comes to views that she wants to spew, but not how she's making money on spreading those views and getting those likes. So I think it is pretty interesting that those who believe in freedom until they face consequences for their own actions refuse to take responsibility for those actions and for not recognizing laws that exist in Canada and the US regarding sanctions. And that it's okay if an individual wants to make money off of sanctioned entities, but then when it comes time to answer for those things, doesn't seem to not be able to find words to speak. I find it incredibly disappointing, but also not surprised, if I'm being completely honest. So
You know why she's not answering these questions? Because she knows what a joke this is. I mean, the fact that you took like 3 minutes of talking about, well, I don't know who this woman is. I've never seen her, but according to my records, she has mocked and, epitomized trans kids. She's attacked and demonized the LGBTQ. What does that have to do with Russia? What does that have to do anything with any foreign government? That somehow that is strictly Russian disinformation. Like nowhere else in the world are they critiquing the LGBTQ agenda. Nowhere else in the world. Apparently it's only Russia. But then they start bringing in, oh, well, she's also attacking Ukraine's sovereignty and she's attacking this. You mean like actually exploring the details of why the conflict in Ukraine started? Like maybe talking about 2014, the Maidan coup, how the United States and foreign intelligence overthrew that country, stole their democracy, installed a comedian who ran on a peace ticket and now is one of the biggest dictators of the country, who's silencing out opposition. Let's talk about the sovereignty. Let's talk about that. I feel like they have some questions to answer that they are not doing. While they're attacking Lauren Chen, which she knows that this whole thing is a setup. They know this. She knows this whole thing is a setup purposely done to silence out a competitor, silence out independent competitors. And because Tenet Media is an upcoming rising star, just like any other YouTuber, podcaster, that's why they're putting all these censorship bills together, because they know that podcasters is the new wave. People are sick and tired of legacy media. They're sick and tired of paying extortionate amounts to watch TV to lie to them when they can go online and get content from actual people and get a reasonable response, get rational conversations, get actual nuance. So that is amazing. And, you know, I don't know. Personally, I don't know much about Tenet Media. I don't watch all their shows. But here's just an example of what they're trying to smear as Russian disinformation. So one of Lauren Chen's tweets before she got, trying to get canceled by the Canadian government and also the U.S. indictments, she says, exciting news. This is from April. Exciting news. I'll be hosting the We Unify Reclaiming Canada conference this June in Victoria, BC. I will also be performing stand-up comedy and taking part in a lively conversation with Lauren Southern on women in politics. Speakers include Dr. Drew, Dr. Peter McCullough, and more. And look at it. They got Dr. Drew, Dr. Bhattacharya, Dr. McCullough, Lauren Chen, Lauren Southern, Gray Humphrey. There's Tamara Leach. There's, I don't know who the other two are. John, I can't read the bottom there. It's cut off. But yeah, it just seems like such Russian disinformation. Having conversations with other Canadians, having conversations with doctors. Yeah, that's definitely Russian disinformation that Lauren Chen is getting paid millions of dollars to spread across Canada. Or maybe that a businessman just happens to invest in a podcast company because that podcast company is successful enough that he might get an actual return from. That's what maybe just a simple business tactic, regardless of what nation you come from. But they were trying to make this as a Russian ploy because Lauren Chen, Tenet Media, these institutions causing havoc and cause direct competition to the narrative control that people within Parliament are trying to maintain. And since we're talking about media connections with foreign entities, just a reminder that our traditional Canadian media also should be held responsible for the same tactic. If we're going to talk about Lauren Chen and her grievances and her sins of, getting $10 million from a Russian businessman, how about the fact that CTV gets direct aid and assistance from the Azov Battalion in Ukraine to thwart their journalistic ethics to push the side of the Azov Battalion, a bunch of neo-Nazis. As this guy points out, looks like CTV gets its Ukraine footage directly from Azov Battalion. CTV Vancouver credited them on Wednesday morning's segment on the same day President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke before Parliament. Yes, that was the day that everybody in the House of Commons stood up and applauded not only for Zelensky, but an actual legit Nazi. Not just once, but twice. So if we're going to talk about meddling and foreign interference and demonizing Canadians and how there needs to be a moral justitude for that, look directly in the mirror, folks. Look directly in the mirror for the people in Parliament on that. That's just crazy. Or how about direct domestic interference? Because Justin Trudeau ill-famously paid off a lot of these media institutions from Bell and Rogers and all these media conglomerates, the CBC, paid them off as a bribe to not investigate Parliament, to not investigate his party. And he was so proud of that that he even admitted that out loud at this public event. Listen to this.
Sometimes hear about liberal bias in the media these days, how they're constantly letting our government off the hook for no good reason. Frankly, I think that's insulting. It's clear that they let us off the hook for a very good reason, because we paid them $600 million. You don't get stellar headlines like these without greasing the wheels a bit.
Don't get stellar headlines like these without greasing the wheels. That is him openly admitting at a public event that Justin Trudeau took your tax dollars to pay off the media so he wouldn't be reported or investigated by these journalists. That's why I find it so laughable when the CBC continues to state itself as a public broadcaster when really it's just state point media. Because the public doesn't get a say in this. The public has no idea what's going on. It's our tax dollars, it's our money that goes towards it. But we don't get jack squat in the say of how CBC operates, how they're covering their stories. And it goes directly from the government to the CEO's pockets. We saw that with Catherine Tate, this former CEO, openly admitting that she took that money for granted and screwed over the workers at CBC. And just the awfulness and just how they're degrading their own network. The reporting styles is just absolutely hitting rock bottom. It's a joke now to turn on the television here in Canada and see the reporting. And now you know why. Now you know why. And he's laughing about it. Just how great that is. We paid them $600 million to do what? Shut the hell up on us. Don't investigate, don't report, don't do any journalism. Just repeat our garbage. And you think that would be something that, North Korea would only be capable of doing, or the Soviet Union, or a Nazi party back in the 1930s Germany. But no, this is Canada. That is Justin Trudeau. As Jane Fonda once proudly said, don't trust the pretty-faced liberal. And I think people are starting to understand that. How crazy that is. Here's also another big kicker of this story of just how crazy this situation is. So, this guy, I can't pronounce his name, something Ahmed. He points out Lauren Chen is the only person from Tenet who had her YouTube canceled. The only person. She's the only person who is anti-Zionist and has been calling out the Israeli war crimes. While Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, and Benny Johnson had not had their YouTube channels banned. Hey, that's another interesting question. Since we're on the subject of foreign interference, since we're on the subject of getting paid to spew propaganda towards a certain direction, do we not also talk about that Lauren Chen is a proud supporter of calling out the Israeli war crimes, calling out the genocide, is not soaked into the labyrinth of Zionism? She's not a cult follower like certain other individuals? How's that not brought to attention in this? How's that not brought attention to the court cases? Oh, because everybody in Parliament is bought off by AIPAC. They're bought off by the Israeli lobby. They're all in support of this. That's why, again, it's so laughable that Canada's trying to play both sides of this. Well, we care about Palestinians and we want to support, college students protesting, but at the same time, Israel has the right to defend itself. They're playing both sides of the war to keep it going, to keep it lavishing, because they know at the end, it doesn't matter to them. They're going to make profit off the death and disparity no matter where it comes from. But they're going to call out Lauren Chen, who's an anti-Zionist, calling this garbage out. And that never brings any attention to any of these court cases, any of the trials, any of the parliamentary meetings on this. But here's, for example, Dave Rubin, who is a contributor to Tenet Media, openly admitting that he's no longer friends with Candace Owens, because Candace Owens, being another anti-Zionist, being someone that also calls out the Israeli war crimes and openly states about the genocide and the horrific warfare. Here's Dave Rubin talking to Patrick Bet-David about why we can't be friends.
I think she's a little confused about some of the things, but I think, well, I hope you heard the overriding part, which is that I don't want to make it personal with her. I don't really consider us friends anymore. But that's just like the nature of the reality of the thing that we're all in.
She's just confused. She's confused. It's the nature of the reality of which we're all in. Meaning that Dave Rubin is a bought paid for shill for a Zionist cult project, the Greater Israeli Project, which is why he's ramping up conversations on, being pro-genocide and doing stuff like this, and not understanding Candace Owens, calling her confused and saying, we got to end this relationship. Oh, it's not personal, it's business. So it's amazing that in all the conversations about Lauren Chen and how demoralizing she is, she's taking all this money and she's infestating the mainstream internet with Russian disinformation. And yet you have commentators who are deliberately engaged with Israel propaganda. We know that they're getting contributions by AIPAC and other donors by the Mossad, by Mossad agents that are peddling this conspiracy, that are peddling the pro-genocide. And you also have people in parliament that are also at fault of their own commitments of foreign interference, of taking money from foreign entities and pushing misinformation, putting and epitomizing Canadians based on their agenda. We know that's happening. So the whole thing is a deliberate attack on people like Lauren Chen, who agree or disagree with what she says, agree or disagree with her channel and what she spews. But this is deliberately an attack on independent media, because if they look at the broader perspective, they want to really have a sit-down, full conversation about media and foreign entities influencing that media, influencing the news, influence the narratives that they're putting out there, then they'd have to look at legacy media like CTV, CBC, and other domestic entities. They would have to look at Parliament, and they would have to look at deep insiders that control Canadian policies. But they will never do so. And that's why this whole case is so hypocritical, and why people like Lauren Chen are not going to respond to this. Because she knows it's going to be a setup. No matter what she's going to say, they're going to take that soundbite and they're going to smack her down with it. Because God forbid, having competition, having independent media being a competitor to legacy media and having a different voice and opinion is so demoralizing to Canada. That's why they want to control the thoughts, they want to control the narrative, and put forth these horrific censorship bills before they know that the Liberals are going to get kicked out of office. That's why they're fast-tracking this, to garner control of the narrative.